didn't really think about it. It just happened because I grew up in a family that were all artists and writers and designers. And it just came naturally that I would start emulating what they were interested in and picking up something and thinking about its form and why it's made that way. And I began making models of things at a very early age. So I didn't really think about, going back to your question, making a decision. It just oozed into who I am, what I did, what I do still. I think before I started making models, I actually built a shortwave radio. You could buy the parts and the kits from Allied Radio. This is a long, long time ago, in 1950s. And it would come and you'd have to have a soldering iron and follow the instructions. But I built a shortwave radio, and so you could listen to points even in Europe where we had just been on that trip. And to hear voices in different languages in different parts of the world. So that was not making a model, but it was following directions, but having to use a soldering iron and not connect the wrong wire with the wrong terminal. And you'd end up with something that was quite wonderful, fun to play with. But then I would make models of all sorts of things. I really have always been fascinated with the grid, both from drawing, architectural drawing, but also in designing product, to have things to scale. It's very helpful to have graph paper, grid paper, and large and small pieces. And I was just fascinated, and always have been, with square. And then I was also very influenced by a book, which is right over there, called Discovery of the Square by Bruno Munari, 1965, Italian designer, very prolific. And he talks all about the origins of the square throughout history, not just in the design world, but things that were maybe naturally square in nature as well. And so for this particular moving from, I had a studio, a painting studio, and a model making shop in Sea Ranch in our house in a separate building, and coming here and changing our environment so much and having the new space we have here, I thought, now what am I going to do now with my paintings? Because I was used to doing quite large paintings. Why don't this time, because it's much smaller space here at Ensō Village, why don't I do things both smaller and remembering the book about squares, why don't I do everything square? So I gave myself that parameter of, just for fun, I did over 105 pieces since coming here, mostly on paper, some on birch panels, with telling myself, no, I'm going to stick to the square. It began with having the first child. My daughter was born in 1967, which is the same time as opening up a toy shop in Santa Monica, which I did for several years. And one of the first things a child responds to over the civilizations of time is something that will make a noise. It's nice to lick and touch and safe. And so I made for her some baby rattles. And that grew into, seeing other baby rattles, especially in Europe, that are made of all these different materials. Some of them are in fact quite dangerous because there are sharp points to them. But then beginning to realize it was a fascinating subject to think about all of these materials being used, from gourds to handmade woven things, to wood, to metal, to silver, to gold. And I began adding a couple of rattles for our daughter, but also realizing the beauty of them as a piece of design. So I began collecting rattles, and now we have a collection of about 500 rattles. We've done 2 books about them, just focused on rattles. And now we're trying to think about who would be what museum would be a good museum or a good collector that should take these over now. At our age, what are we going to do with all these? They're now all in boxes and boxes. So that led to collecting of other things. We have a small book collection. In other words, tiny, tiny little books that are on all different subjects that fascinated us. We collected stamps, of course. Everybody collected stamps, but they are graphically so interesting. and we collected design posters because we're both designers in the design world. As we would go to different exhibits, different museums, we have quite a collection of posters which depict what that artist or that designer was showing in their exhibit. When we began designing all of these products, Lou and I, we were working for another company, the first significant modern design store in the country, Design Research, which started in 1951. And we were both managers at they had 10 locations, but I ended up managing the main flagship store in Cambridge, but they were based in Boston. But there was a store in Beverly Hills on Wilshire Boulevard. That's where Lou and I met, because she was the store manager for this big 2-story store next to Saks Fifth Avenue. It was a very wonderful location. And she was being offered to take a position in the corporate offices in Boston, but they said, first you have to find someone to take over your role as manager. So I was out of work at that point, or I wasn't happy with what I was doing, and I had a headhunter in New York who worked in the design field, and she told me about this position at Design Research in Beverly Hills. So I went for an interview, had never met Lou, and that's how we met. And she ended up hiring me. I think she just really wanted to get promoted. And that became, this is 1972. And then at some point we decided, we know how to do this. Let's leave the company when it seems right and start our own. So we began our first entrepreneurial exercise, becoming retailers ourselves, and we opened in Concord, Massachusetts, a little tiny town, historical town. And it was 30 minutes or more drive from Boston, which is closer to where we lived. And we opened Placewares, and we made up the name Wares for Your Place. At the same time, we also started another company called Place Makers, all one word, because we were making places for people. So that's how the entrepreneurial bent and the retail got mixed in with the product design. And then we would design product listening to our customer that we felt people wanted a solution, but there weren't any good solutions on the market. We would design products for the home and office, and then we had to get those produced. So we would go to trade fairs, not just in this country, but other countries, and try to find a manufacturer who seemed to have the right sensibilities and the right equipment to produce a product. And so that was the relationship, and we built up quite a collection of things that we designed in all different materials, again for the housewares industries and the furniture industries. And then we opened galleries as well. That's another tangent of being retailers in a different way. And we had two different fine arts galleries. And in one location they were merged. There was the design store, Placewares, and Lyndon Design Gallery. Then at this now age, we decided fairly recently to close that down, and we began searching. We found Ensō Village, which looked fascinating. It would give us an opportunity to enter a new chapter of our lives, which we're doing. And yes, it was giving up the ocean, because we were on the coast, and giving up all sorts of other things, but we also gained a whole new appreciation of other values people have. Design isn't the only thing in the world. There are all sorts of other interesting things going on. And what's so fascinating to us both is the people living here that we meet. Here is such a potpourri of not just architects, designers, artists, writers, authors, psychologists, psychiatrists, lawyers. It's a real mix. Observing and listening are not a medium, but they're essential to producing something in my mind. I was taught from a very young age, or encouraged at a very young age, to draw and to just look at something, get some qualities that it was conveying to me, and put it down on paper, even if you never looked at it again, but to make sketchbooks and sketchbooks and sketchbooks of these impressions. My mother felt it was really time that I understand not just physical hard things, but I should take life drawing classes. And she found at Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles, where she ended up enrolling me. They said, "Oh no, he's too young. We can't let anybody in that age life drawing class." So my mother persisted, and she got me into the class. So I was taking life drawing classes at 8 or 10. I don't remember what age exactly. What's in this show are all sorts of materials combined together. I haven't worried about being strict and faithful to one medium or another, but I have been pretty strict with not just the square form, but the paper. I discovered the idea of taking my many photographs, which I'm also recording on many trips and here, of juxtaposing those, cutting them out in different parts of them and juxtaposing them in a shoebox is the way I started. But then I refined it into making little bamboo boxes and then juxtaposing these images that you could see part of one image against another one, against maybe a third or fourth one. And so these looking boxes here in the exhibit are bamboo boxes for the most part. And I've just had fun putting those cutouts of my own photographs that I print on my home printer on matte paper, not shiny. They're not trying to be shiny photographs, but they're just images that sometimes look like they're painted if you look at the paper. And then they are boxes that can be set on a shelf, hung on the wall, put on the ceiling, whatever. And looking boxes, a name that came up a long time ago. I made them for about 10 years until I finally stopped a couple of years ago because I'd made over 850 individual no duplicates boxes. Just to have the time finally to, it was wonderful having those stores and the galleries all those years, 42 years, but it's also now being embedded in a new place here at Ensō of having the time and the implied patience and orderliness to just proceed at a pace that doesn't mean a lot of phone calls, doesn't mean having to write a lot of letters to manufacturers and checking how something is being made, importing things. All of that's condensed down to the pleasure of just spending time in the little space. Our second bedroom here is our gallery. I'm just doing paintings again, and I want to get back into making three-dimensional things again. It's a pleasure. What gives me joy? That does. Lots of things give me joy, but that's, as an artist, one thing